Hi, everybody. I'm Crystal Haynes. Tonight on Greater Boston, prosecutors are cracking down on online threats, and we'll discuss how Massachusetts is bringing charges against the perpetrators and if this will curb a rise in virtual threats. Plus, to Gen Z voters on how the economy is influencing their pick for president. And from the A-listers to the local artists, a look ahead at this year's Boston Calling Music Festival. Right-wing extremists denying election results, violent reactions to the Israel-Hamas war, COVID-19 and vaccine misinformation. Those are just some of the biggest stories of this past few years. And they're also catalysts for a rise in threats and hate spread online. It's a problem prosecutors across the country are taking very seriously. That includes right here in Massachusetts, where we are seeing a rise in white supremacist incidents as well. Just like the case of a Dedham man who pled guilty to several charges for sending racist death threats to an interracial couple on Facebook. Will prosecutions like that one deter future harassers? Well, GBH's Philip Martin has been following the rise in response to in-person and virtual threats, and he joins me now to discuss this. Welcome, Philip.
Thank you, Crystal.
So talk to me a little bit about what is contributing to the rise in these, I guess, virtual and in-person threats.
Well, you hit the nail on the head. It's online, and that's the key term, because online, a lot of people think they're anonymous. They think they're invisible. They think they can say anything. Some people actually think they have First Amendment rights to say anything, including to threaten people's lives. And many of these threats are predicated on race, on gender, on LGBTQ status, on any number of things. And as you pointed out, they're exacerbated by a number of things. The Gaza-Israel war, without question, perhaps the main motivator is the big lie. Donald Trump stating over and over and over again, and millions of his supporters believing that he won the election of 2020 and was disenfranchised by Biden and Democrats. So you have many of his followers who basically say, this is really problematic, and I'm going to threaten the person who supervised this election, or I'm going to threaten this black couple down the street, or I'm going to threaten the person who believes that I should have a COVID vaccine, and others, and I'm going to take it out on them via a computer, via social messaging, Facebook, X, any number of social media platforms.
Well, you mentioned former President Trump. We actually have a video that was posted on Truth Social today before it was taken down, and it showed images of a fake newspaper article with the narrator reading hypothetical headlines. And one of these headlines that's referenced, you zoom in and you can see it says creation of a unified Reich. So let's take a look at that.
What happens after Donald Trump wins? What's next for America?
And you can see it highlighted right there, creation of a unified Reich. This, to me, is just really disturbing.
It manifests in the type of death threats I'm talking about from his supporters. If this is a man who's talking about creating a Reich, if you don't have to have lived through World War II to understand that 50 million people around the world died in a conflict that began with Nazi Germany, with fascism. And you have a man who, according to his ex-wife, kept a copy of Mein Kampf next to his bed, the Hitler biography, and here he is threatening, and I do call it a threat, but people should see it as a promise, that he would create a type of Reich if he is elected. This is not to be seen in any type of minor context. This is a major point, and it represents the type of threat that we're talking about when people go out and start, for example, threatening election officials, because they believe that this is the type of government that they would like, one that is authoritarian, one that comprises of a series of revenge and retribution. I spoke to a Trump supporter the other day. At the end of this interview, interviewed this man in an encampment, a homeless encampment. He gave me a button. You know what the button says? I have a picture of it. It says, it's a picture of Trump, and it says revenge.
Wow.
That's what the button says. It says nothing else but revenge. So people should be under no illusion. This is not an ordinary moment that we're living in. This is a moment where death threats are proliferating, and many of those are being made as a result of the big lie.
So why is it so important that the prosecutions in these cases happen and follow through with a verdict? We talk about this Dedham case at the top of the segment here.
Well, this man, with two addresses actually, in Boston and in Dedham, and acting U.S. Attorney Joshua Levy said that he has never seen the amount, the level of hate that is present right now in our political landscape and on social media. Since he left the U.S. Attorney's office 17 years ago and returned in this acting capacity. And he says it's important because people believe that they can indeed get away with this. And if they believe they can get away with it, it will proliferate. You will have more and more death threats directed at people because of the color of their skin, because who they choose to love, because they happen to be a woman, because they are just differently abled. The number of factors that contribute to the rise in death threats are those, as well as, again, as I pointed out, the big lie. And so it's important to, if you will, nip it in the bud, not to assume that you can actually type on your computer, hit the send button with a threat to take someone's life and assume that you can get away with it. This is why Joshua Levy and other U.S. attorneys around the country are pushing this. And it's also why the DOJ, under the current DOJ, under Merrick Garland, is pushing to arrest, quite literally, these situations.
Yeah, and these messages are not anything to really, scoff at. I mean, these are pretty serious things. Like, we have a few of them. They're obviously very illicit, so we want to warn folks. They're up here on your screen. Some of them, snitches get stitches. Read up more on me, LOL. You will see how me and my crew will burn the N-word alive. Lots of really terrible language that's being used here. And these are threats. And the First Amendment is one thing. The threats are completely different.
And let me give you some other examples. At Cornell, after October 7th, of course, you had a situation where a Cornell student threatened to kill Jewish students. You had a member of the JDL, Jewish Defense League in Michigan, who threatened to hunt down Palestinians. You had a man in Maine who was recently prosecuted and convicted, who threatened to kill his black neighbors. You have a man in Louisville, Kentucky, who threatened to bomb an LGBTQ pride parade. And of course, there are those cases that are even more well-known, individuals threatening to kill a black woman and her daughter in Georgia because they worked as election officials in Georgia during the 2020 election. And so, again, Garland and others believe that if you don't put this situation to rest, if you don't prosecute, and it's not always easy, by the way, to prosecute. It's not always easy to track down these IP addresses. Some people are more clever than others. This fellow, DeBernardinis, that you referenced in Dedham and Hyde Park, he used a Facebook account. He was very explicit about who he was. That led police to his door many months after he sent this death threat, but they did arrive at his door. And according to investigators, he was shocked that they showed up to arrest him after threatening to burn, and the N-word, he said, alive.
That's incredible, because I think a lot of people do think that they have some sort of anonymity online and they can do whatever they want.
There's that assumption. The notion of being online cloaks people. It's like an invisible cloak of some sort, or so they assume, in not being detected. So it cloaks them in this invisible garb. But there's no such thing. If law enforcement is serious about prosecuting, they will track down some of these individuals. And by the way, there's some inconsistency of who gets prosecuted. And I can talk about that a bit, too.
Please talk about that,
All right,
yeah.
So the inconsistency is this. The case I referenced in Michigan, for example, Dearborn, Michigan, where a Farmington Hills man, a member of the Jewish Defense League, determined by the U.S. State Department and the Justice Department years ago to be a terrorist organization because of its role in assassinating Rabin in Israel, this man was arrested, but not by the federal officials, but by a local DA. Now compare that to the federal charge against the man in Cornell who threatened to kill Jewish students. That is a federal case, and it's considered a major case. I spoke to the DA's assistant in Detroit, who is prosecuting the case in Michigan, and she called it a minor case. The man who threatened to hunt down Palestinians. So this is part of the issue for some, that though there's a serious focus on death threats, there's a question of which threats are considered more important than others.
And very important to continue to follow your reporting on this. Philip Martin, thank you so much.
Thank you, Krista.
Gen Z voters on the opposite ends of the political spectrum can agree on a few things, including their anxiety around the economy. In the latest edition of GBH News' Politics IRL series, David Buckley, a 20-year-old Republican, sat down with Clive Lawrence, a 21-year-old progressive, to talk about the economy under both Trump and Biden. Let's take a look.
When you had someone like Donald Trump as president, the economy was at one point the best that it had ever been. My background sort of started actually seeing Donald Trump announce his presidency back in 2015. I was like just about to finish off 5th grade. I plan on 100% voting for Donald Trump this November.
I am a leftist. I likely will not be voting for Joe Biden in November. I think that he's alienated me. I do plan, I think, to vote for either Cornel West or Claudia de la Cruz and Karina Garcia.
When you had someone like Donald Trump as president, the economy was at one point the best that it had ever been. Second Biden came in, we saw inflation just skyrocket immediately, like a bunch of unuseful spending.
I think that Biden's handling of the economy has in many ways somehow been better than I would expect, but also still bad. Biden's immediate response to COVID was the American Rescue Plan, the bipartisan infrastructure law, and the Inflation Reduction Act. I think those three key pieces of legislation helped to kind of almost save the U.S. from like a technical recession, so to speak.
I personally think Biden's handling of the economy has been rather poor. You know, there are companies at this point that I think are screwing the average American over. I definitely think that's true.
I think that the stimulus checks are like a really good way to allow Americans to have disposable income. Of course, at the same time, we've seen price increases, we've seen inflation, and those things have to be recognized as problems for the average American.
I'm concerned, definitely, for what the future may look like if Biden gets reelected, especially after graduating college.
Why is Trump such a powerful figure on the right? There are things that working class and white voters feel like they saw Trump address. That doesn't mean that Trump himself is the right figure for addressing those issues. I do think that, again, fundamentally the issue is that Republicans and Democrats are essentially a uniparty in many ways when it comes to protecting the interest of the owning class. But I mean, that doesn't mean that we should be going in a more conservative direction. You know what I mean?
I think it's funny is that you and I both agree that there's a uniparty. I completely think that too.
Trump, I think, hasn't shown an interest in ensuring that unions are not only protected but also improved.
I do think that's actually very false. I think actually this year, more than any years that Trump has ran, unions are more open to supporting him than ever.
I don't really know, because I feel like Republican policy and conservative policy doesn't really focus on unions as an actual thing that we should move toward. And I think that's part of why we see the current inflation and price increases was because what Trump's tax cuts, I think, allowed companies to do is basically get away with these exorbitant price increases.
I think under Donald Trump, we saw a very prosperous economy. I think if it's been proven to work before, why not do it again when literally the policies that are happening right now are proven to fail us?
I think that David had a few thought-provoking points around the labor movement for the Republican Party, and I do think that it kind of comes from a little bit of a misunderstanding of how working class movements have typically operated throughout American history. I think I was able to share some of my perspective regarding the Biden administration, as well as reasons why young voters are feeling so alienated at this moment.
No, I didn't realize that when I was coming in today that he'd be saying he wasn't going to be voting for Joe Biden. I think that one of the things that we agreed on the most was that a lot of the Democratic Party policies are not successful for the United States at this time. I thought we had a really good conversation. I still have the same views that I did coming in here.
For more politics IRL on everything from abortion rights to the war in Gaza, check out the GBH News YouTube page. And finally tonight, Boston Calling kicks off this Friday. The three-day festival features stars like Ed Sheeran, Hozier, Megan Thee Stallion. But among those A-listers are plenty of local acts as well. GBH News arts and culture reporter and associate producer Haley Lerner caught up with just a few of them, and she joins me now. We were just talking about this off camera. Such an exciting weekend in Boston, and I guess technically Cambridge, right?
Yeah, it's a really fun weekend, and it is actually in Brighton. But it's going to be a crazy weekend. There's going to be a lot of traffic on the T, I can assume, and the people going to the festival, it's going to be a lot of fun.
That shows you how hip I am. I thought it was in Cambridge, but here we are. So what are you looking most forward to?
I'm really looking forward to, of course, there are some big headliners that I'm very excited about. I'm really excited to see Hozier. I love seeing him every time. I'm excited for some other names like Renee Rapp and Chapel Rome, but it's the local stage that's really going to bring a lot of amazing talent that's from the area. I believe there's about 17 local performers, which is a lot on a set list. And so there's going to be just so many great performances, and they're really going to be representing all different parts of Boston and the music scene.
So is it usually that many local artists, 17 you just mentioned?
They've been trying to, I think, have the numbers up of local artists in recent years. I think last year was pretty similar. So it is an effort that they have, and there is an extreme focus on having these local artists, and there's a whole separate stage just for the local artists.
I imagine that for someone who's performing in and around Boston, it's a huge deal to be able to play Boston Calling.
Yeah, I talked to a lot of the artists that are going to be performing, the local artists, and that's what they said. It's a real crazy moment for them, being, whether they grew up in Boston or grew up in the music scene here. Boston Calling, it's in the name. It's the biggest festival here in the area, and it feels really special to them. It feels like a real homecoming, and they know a lot of each other. You know, it's a very small, tight-knit music scene here, and so they get to support each other and perform their music, and it's a really big deal for them.
I know the organizers are always thoughtful of that sort of mix of genre of artists. You know, a little bit of rap, a little bit of folk, a little bit of R&B, you know, things like that. I mean, I imagine every year someone's looking for their favorite artist.
Yeah, the days kind of change based on the sound. You can kind of tell by the lineup that's a little different per sound each day. And I think within the local artists, there is a lot of variety. There's rock, there's shoegaze, there's rap, there's hip hop. There's a lot of variety, and I think if you were to go to the local stage, you're going to get a lot of those different genres.
Was there like any big, you know, headliner that you know of that Boston Calling was really trying to get this year?
I don't know. I mean, not that I can think of. I know there's been kind of changes in the set list here. There could always be a surprise. You never know. But I know Ed Sheeran is a big name to be headlining this year. There's going to be Megan Thee Stallion. They're just some names that people would pay a lot of money to see at a concert in general. So you get to see them and a lot of other great acts.
I'm also thoughtful about, you know, there's a ton of festivals this time of year. I've been to Boston Calling back in the day when it first started, of course, and then, you know, Newport in January and things like that. So, like, where does Boston Calling rank for folks who are, I guess, you know, festival aficionados?
Yeah, so I think Boston Calling is never going to be as big as Coachella, seemingly due to the space that we have here in the city, but it still is, in my opinion, a very big regional festival. Before I ever lived in Boston, I knew about it and knew, oh, I want to go there. There's a great name on that lineup. And I do think the lineup is a bit different than other festivals. A lot of festivals have very similar lineups as the summer season goes around, and I do think Boston Calling has a bit more of an alternative and rock angle on it. So there's that difference, but it's definitely a very well-known festival. There are 4 stages, so it brings a lot to offer in the area for music.
What would be be your tips for someone who's looking to go and really maximize their experience?
So make sure you check the FAQ on the website to make sure you have all the right things. I know they're very strict bag requirements. I believe you can only have a fanny pack sized thing or a clear bag, which can be a little bigger. Bring a reusable water bottle. It is going to be hot. You do not want to be dehydrated. Bring earplugs. I am a big advocate for protecting your ears at concerts. It can be very loud. And also just look at the lineup and figure out your path for the day. You don't want to be running around back and forth between stages. Try to find a stage and stick to it, or a couple blocks at a stage and then move on to another, because your feet are going to hurt. Wear sneakers.
This is a hot ticket, though, but there's still some tickets that are available.
Yeah, there are tickets available. I believe one-day tickets are a little under $200, and then three-day passes are a bit under $400. They're a little higher than they were when they originally went on sale, but you still can buy tickets.
That's good news, because I imagine, especially for local folks, the prep for a performance like this is really important and also really exciting.
Yeah, I've been talking to these artists that have been prepping. They've really been rehearsing hard, making sure that they're getting the best performances possible. One artist, Cake Swag, she was telling me all about how, so she has a Dorchester dance studio that's coming and joining her on stage, whole thing of dancers, and so she's like, we've been in boot camp mode, all these artists are basically having a tech week as if they were in a production. So it's a very big deal for them, and they want to make sure they get their performances down perfect.
I imagine, and also to have that audience experience that feels just as good on the local artist stage than it does on the main stage.
Yeah, absolutely. They're still bringing out great, they're making sure they have proper sets and dancers. They're not scaling it back just because they're not as big as some of the other artists. They're still putting out the same quality of performance.
All right, we're very excited about this, I can say. Haley Lerner, thank you so much.
Thank you.
That's it for tonight, but come right back here tomorrow. Massachusetts' birth rate is among the lowest in the nation. We'll dig into why residents are opting not to have kids and how the dwindling population will impact the state in years to come. That and more tomorrow at 7. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Crystal Haynes. Good night.
I'm Joe Biden, and I approve this message.
I'm Nikki Haley, and I approve this message.
Oh, didn't see that coming.
Is yet to come.
And
Donald J.
you
Trump, and I
approve this message. Okay, seriously, what gives with this, right? Why does every single candidate say, I approve this message, or something like that every cycle? Does this phrase hold well? Does it cast some sort of subliminal spell on voters?
Read my lips.
No, of course not. Candidates do it because they have to, by law. It's commonly known as the Stand By Your Ad provision.
The Stand By Your Ad rule goes back to a law that Congress passed in 2002 called the Bipartisan Campaign Reform Act. This was a large overhaul of all the federal campaign finance rules. And one of the provisions in that law said federal candidates, political committees that are doing ads on radio or on television, they need an affirmative statement that says that they approve this message.
Now, it should be noted that disclosure has always been required. Watch any political ad from any era, and you'll see text on the screen at some point informing voters who paid for the spot. Another thing that has been common in political ads for as long as there have been political ads, going negative. Here's Dwight D. Eisenhower in one of the very first ever TV ads for a presidential campaign.
Instead of asking what party will bring prices down, why not ask what party put prices up? Then vote for a change.
But through the 1970s, 80s, and into the 90s, those negative ads steadily became more common and more biting.
You will be better off 4 years from now than you are today.
Well, it's 4 years later. How you doing?
Sick burn. So, Congress passed the new law requiring not just text, but also that accompanying declaration by the candidate themselves that their campaign is responsible for the ad. That statement must be made in their voice on radio, and on TV, it must include video of them saying it, or their voice must be accompanied by their image.
I think what we put in those ads is different. Some candidates are less likely to want to go negative against their opponents in those ads. They may be less likely to want to focus on certain controversial areas because they have to do that.
Problem solved, right? Well,
on the one hand, there have been studies that purport to show that the implementation of the stand by your ad rule did lower the amount of negative ads run by the candidates themselves. On the other hand, I think if you asked anyone on the street, they would say negative advertising in politics is worse than ever.
Did you catch that? By the candidates themselves. Crucially, the stand by your ad provision only applies to ads run by the campaigns of the candidates, not any third-party groups, like the Swift Boat Veterans for Truth, who famously criticized John Kerry's Vietnam record in a series of ads in 2004.
Can America trust a man who betrayed his country?
Or Priorities USA, who spent millions on anti-Donald Trump ads in 2020.
Donald Trump is failing America.
In the 2022 election cycle, outside groups spent more on ads than the candidates combined in 54 different federal races.
They can take unlimited amounts of money where the candidates and the campaigns are limited by campaign finance regulations. It's natural for the TV ad buy to go to these super PACs who can raise unlimited money and can say things that the candidates can't.
Another critical caveat now that we're in the 21st century, the law does not require candidates to stand by their ad on the internet.
What we're seeing over the last few cycles is that the ability to target messages and talk to individual voters online and through social media platforms and others is having a bigger and bigger impact.
Now that we are 22 years past the passage of the Bipartisan Campaign Reform Act, the internet is eating up more and more campaign dollars relative to TV and radio.
There have been numerous efforts to expand the stand by your ad provision. Some bills would require CEOs of third-party groups to appear and approve, just like the candidates. Others would extend all those requirements to ads online.
A lot of those ads online are 10 or 15-second ads, and so it would be very, very hard to enforce this rule. I mean, now you're cutting a 10-second ad down to 5 seconds because they have to have the 5-second disclaimer at the end.
For now, even online ads must still include a visual disclosure, so be aware and don't be afraid to do a little digging to see who is selling you what.
It's important for people to look behind the ads, and they can do that through the Federal Election Commission. Any political committee, any campaign that is running advertising, you can see who their contributors are and you can see what they're spending money on.
All that information is available at a pretty easy to remember URL, fec.gov. Well, there you have it, folks. Our thanks to Emerson College for always keeping us curious. Until next time, I'm Edgar B. Herwick III, and I approve this message. Stay curious out there.
There will be